So ladies and gentlemen, Justin and Prim, what is the point of faceting?
Thank you. So if you guys have been at this event before, you've probably seen me give a talk, maybe many. I've been here a couple of years, a bunch of years, and I try to write something new every year because it's fun for me to think about, or to share what I've been thinking about over the last year. And as he said, I'm teaching and, talking to all the faceting people online. So people are constantly asking me different questions or giving me sort of different prompts. So this talk, What's the Point of Faceting, came about last November. Michael Holmes and some other people in New England wanted to do this new event called Meet Point Meetup. And if you guys haven't heard about it, we did a video, and I think, is the article out yet or not yet? Next USFG newsletter, you're going to see there's a guide to how to do this Meet Point Meetup and what it means. But after the Meet Point Meetup, which was an awesome thing, so you guys should definitely check out the article, I had gotten some feedback from some people that were in the event, and they were asking me questions about some of the stuff that I had said or giving me some ideas about stuff I should talk about. So this talk is directly in response to some of the questions and comments that were happening at the Meet Point Meetup. So thanks to everyone that came there to spark some ideas. So I won't introduce myself too much. I'm Justin. I'm from Chicago. I lived in Bangkok. Now I live in France. A lot of people still think I live in Bangkok, but I'm in France now. We have a school out there. I teach 4 times a year, 2 times in New York, 2 times in Lyon, France. If you guys want to come out, I recommend the French one. It's cheaper. New York is very expensive. Probably, hopefully, everyone has my book. If not, too late. It's sold out. But there's a new one coming this summer, so watch out for that. The Historic Teachings of Gem Cutting. So if you like Scott's talk, you will love this book because everything that he said is pretty much in the book, probably not to the replicating accuracy degree of what he's been doing, but to get the themes and get the ideas of everything that's been happening in the last 500 years of diamond and colored stone cutting. We're putting together something really cool with that. And yeah, I've been traveling all over the world, meeting cutters, talking to cutters, learning from cutters, and a lot of the stuff I'm going to show you guys today or talk about today is influenced by my travels because I've been fortunate enough to really see the process of kind of the mind to market and everything that goes on with the world of professional and hobby cutting. So I want to kind of look at both of those today. So this is going to be, what's the point of faceting? So here's our roadmap for today. I want to talk about how gemstones work and are cut for the jewelry trade. And then I want to compare that to how gemstones are cut for the faceting world, which I think is more of what you guys are familiar with. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about how do the stones move when they move for jewelry and kind of what's the point, what's the purpose, why are we doing these different types of cutting? And then I want to talk about some of the benefits of just for the cutter themselves. And I'm sure you guys will all relate to those things. I want to talk about some of the pitfalls from these different ways and approaches and ideologies of cutting. And then I want to look at one case study just to give us a reference point from the past and maybe share an interesting story from last week. And then some final thoughts, and hopefully some final thoughts from you guys. I want to start with the jewelry trade, because my journey as a cutter has taken me from the world of hobby cutting and home cutting to Bangkok, where we're working with factories, and now to France, where we're working with jewelers, and we have our own office and all this stuff. So I've been able to kind of see both sides of the cutting world, and I want to take you on a journey for this section, which is it's a pretty typical journey. It's basically the journey of how stones move from mine to market and all the ways that they get cut, I guess. The story starts with the mine. So of course we know miners are at the mine, they're pulling stones out. The stones then have to go someplace. The mining areas are not usually places where you can go and buy stones. I mean, sometimes, we know Farouk, right? He goes wild and crazy places, but typically the mine is not the market. It's not the rough market, it's not the gem market, it's usually someplace else. So once the rough comes out of the ground and they're collected, maybe by the miners, maybe by the boss miners, or maybe by brokers that go around to the different mines, depending on what part of the world you're in, the stones are going to go to a hub. my main experience has been the hub of Bangkok. Bangkok is, I think, the biggest gemstone cutting hub in the world for colored stones. So we get a lot of people coming from all over the world to Bangkok. People from Africa bringing rough, people from Burma bringing rough, people from Cambodia and Vietnam bringing rough. Not so much South America, because they've got their own cutting centers down there, but a lot of the world is going to Bangkok or maybe going to Sri Lanka, depending on where the stones are coming from, and they're going to get cut. So Bangkok's full of cutting factories. There's a couple major cities in Sri Lanka that are full of cutting factories. Sometimes the cutting factories can be just a couple of guys, like these two guys. This factory actually had 4 people. There's 2 guys here, and then there's 2 guys behind them, and that's the whole thing. So it's a workshop. And then some of them might be bigger. This is my friend's gem cutting factory in Bangkok. He has about 25 people there, and that's one of the bigger factories that I've ever seen in Bangkok. They're not typically huge, though I have seen at least one factory that had about 200 cutters. Actually, that was in Bangkok too. So that was a bigger one. But typically they're more like 5 to 10 to 15 people. They're not huge. So stones go to Bangkok in this example. They're going to get cut. So this is the first cut. Or maybe they're in Sri Lanka and they just go to another part of Sri Lanka to get cut. Now in Sri Lanka, you can't export rough. So all stones are going to get cut. Theoretically, all stones will get cut in Sri Lanka before they go anywhere else. Bangkok, people are going to come from all over the world to drop off the stones, or they send them to people like me maybe, in order to do the cutting factory service, and then they go back to wherever they come from. So a lot of the stones come to Bangkok, and the cutting factories just buy them out. You know, the African guys come with all their rough, and the factory just buys the whole parcel, and then they have their stock. So if somebody calls the cutting factory and says, I need this, this, and this, in London, they fulfill the order from the stock that they already have, and then it goes out. But that's only one model, because a lot of times, and Bangkok is a big buying hub, so a lot of times people will cut the stones with Thai cutters, and then they just go out for sale, you know, in the jewelry trade center. It's like a skyscraper of gem merchants. You know, I think there's 2,000 or 3,000 gem merchants in one block in Bangkok, and a lot of them are in this jewelry trade center. So if let's say you're a stone buyer for a brand, you know, a jewelry house in Europe or in America, maybe once or twice or 3 times a year, you go to Bangkok. You never see these guys, because that's not, it's just not part of the buyer's experience. They're looking at the cut stone market. They don't see the cutting factories or any of that. It's already happened. So they go to Bangkok. Yeah, so the cut stones are in the gem market. That could be Bangkok, it could be Jaipur, it could be Ratnapura, it could be here. You know, maybe some of those stones go here. And then, you know, I saw some buyers from cutting factories in Paris that I know buying stones in Pueblo yesterday. So this is one of those places too. But in this example, let's keep it in Bangkok. So this is the jewelry trade center. So all those cut stones that are coming in, depending on, you know, who owns them, but they're going into booths like this. And this open market, this open mall is about 4 stories, and then there's like 40 stories above that are private brokers' offices. So if you're a buyer, whether you're for a big house or maybe you're just a small shop in wherever you come from, you come to Bangkok once a year and you buy all of your stock for the year. So these are already cut stones, and then you're going to take them back to wherever you're coming from. But let's say you are a stone buyer for a good brand, a big jewelry house. So you're going to buy maybe a parcel of rubies or a parcel of tourmaline or a parcel of paraiba or whatever you're there for. And then they're going to go back to let's call them the customer hubs. This could be New York or LA. This could be London or Paris or Geneva. And, you know, in all those cities, there's a neighborhood where jewelers will go. Sometimes customers can go. In London, this is London, Hatton Garden. Anyone can go to that neighborhood and buy stones. But in Paris, if you knew where the gem neighborhood was, you wouldn't even know you were there. There's no signs, there's no shop. It's a secret. Everything's upstairs. There's security doors. So that Paris market's not open for customers, for the public. It's open for the private, you know, commercial customers. So the stones have now moved to either Europe or America, and they're ready to be purchased as they were in Bangkok. And so then you might also have stone buyers from big houses in those cities. So let's say you are Van Cleef & Arpels in Paris. maybe you go to Bangkok, but maybe you need a stone like this week, a special stone. You're looking all around, or you've got a special design that you're working on. You need to source the stone or stones for that. You're not going to fly all the way to Bangkok for that because there is a local gem market that's the stones that have already come from Bangkok. And you're going to find your stone at one of these shops. It's not going to look like this because this is customer facing, but it's going to be drawers and stones and brifkas and stuff like that. And then because you're a high-end brand, and these stones have been cut in Thailand to sort of commercial Thai specs, they have to get cut again. And so this is where the European or the North American cutters come in. This could be you, this could be me, this could be our friend Areli. If you guys have been following my YouTube, you might have seen her in a couple videos recently. She's a 4th generation gem cutter. Her mother was a cutter, her grandmother was a cutter, and her great-grandmother was a cutter on the farm doing the hand crank 100 years ago. So she's been in, her family's been in this for a long time. And so the big brands, they have an idea of what they're going to make. And the stones that they need are typically not already ready to go. They're not just going to get calibrated stones and put them in. If they're doing something like this, where they need all of these sapphires of all the same color to fit in this special setting, they need to get all the stones and have them recut and systematically set into those things. So that's why they need a secondary cutter. Or maybe they just need the stone to be improved because it's not cut to its maximum potential yet. So it's going to get recut by what let's call them master cutters, probably people that know their gemology, people that understand the European aesthetic. As we know, as cutters who are scouring the earth for rough, it's not that easy to get rough, right? Because they're not just doing one, right? If it's a brand, they're going to do, let's say they're going to do 100 pieces. And each one of these looks like it has 4, 8, 9 sapphires. So you need 900 sapphires. You need them to be the same color and the same clarity level. And we know that looking at rough, it's a bit difficult to always know what color it's going to be. And until you start preforming, sometimes it's difficult to know what the clarity is going to be. So first of all, it wouldn't be possible. Where is that rough market? It doesn't exist. The rough that you can buy in Bangkok, it's not the quality that they need. It's hardly the quality of what we want. Most of it's kind of junk. It's the leftover stuff that nobody wanted. That's what you can buy in Bangkok in the market. So I think it has to do with scale, and it has to do with just ease. Someone's job is just to go buy 1,000 stones. Well, if they had to get rough, they'd probably have to get 2,000 to deal with all the broken ones and the included ones and everything else. So this is how the industry's set up. There's these hubs that they can go to. And so then when they get back to Paris or New York or wherever they recut them. Then the recut stones are in the houses for fine jewelry. So sometimes it could be that the recut is being done directly to the specs of the customer. The customer calls a cutting factory in Paris and says, we need this. Do you have anything like this? If it's a really big special stone, it might be that nobody has it, and they have to call everywhere all over the world. Or it might be something a little bit easier. Oh, you need emeralds. Let me show you a suite of emeralds and you can pick out the one, and then we'll find the one that's the closest to the size that you need, and then we'll recut it if we need to. Or maybe you found the right material, but the cutting's not very good, we're going to recut it. So that's a typical journey, and it's common that the stones get cut twice. And it sounds a little bit redundant, I guess, or for us as cutters, it sounds a little bit excessive, but if you think about it, it's kind of great, because this means that all of the stones get cut by somebody in country, whether that's Thailand or Sri Lanka, which means that Thailand and Sri Lanka get to have a cutting industry, which is important for them, for their economy. It means that even though we love rough, we can go out and find these poorly cut stones or moderately cut stones, and we can buy them here. This is what I've been doing this week. I kind of stopped buying rough now. I've been going around the shows looking for, who's got $10 or $20 faceted stones that could get recut. Why do the stones get recut? There's a few different reasons. And so this is our job too. Like our studio in France and what we were doing in Bangkok as well, it's literally this. Half of the stones that we cut are rough coming in, and we just do whatever they want. But, well, not half. It's less than half, because I would say most of the stones we do now are like this. This is one that my wife did. The customer has a nice material. They want it to be cut to the maximum. They're okay to lose a little bit of weight. They've already done the math to make sure it's going to be okay. So they send it to us because it needs improvement visually for no other reason. I mean, this is one example. For no other reason. Maybe it just needs visual improvement. Obviously, big window. It's 2.5 carats, big window. They can afford to lose some weight because they know their numbers, you know, what they bought it for, what they can sell it for. And they give it to us and we transform it into this. And they're happy because we only lost about 0.5 carat in order to do that. But that's not the only reason why it needs to get recut. But for us, that is actually the most common reason. People send us stuff mostly to close the windows, or because they're chipped, or because they have a darkness in them. And you know, the customers usually aren't very eloquent with the way that they describe the stones. But when we look at them, we tell them, this is what we can do. We can do this, we can do that, we can do this, and this is how much weight we think we're going to lose. Is that okay? And we always have to get the okay, because you know, if you do it without asking and then it's not what they wanted, or the weight gets down too low, you probably could lose that customer. So, okay, that's one reason why they get recut. Another reason why they might get recut, and this is quite typical, especially from what I've seen in the French market, but I think this is true everywhere in the end market where the jewelers are at, they need to recut the stones because they don't match the size and shape that they want. You know, maybe all they could get was 1,000 ovals, but actually they need 1,000 baguettes, or they need 1,000 emerald cuts. You know, if you're buying rubies and you need 1,000 baguettes, it's not common that you can go out and find 1,000 baguettes, because rubies typically get cut in ovals because that's the shape of rubies. So if you're the cutter in Bangkok and or the cutter in Jaipur, and you're just going to cut every stone to be the biggest stone that you can make because you know that your customer's just looking at sizes, well, you'll make the biggest stone that you can. Maybe it's a bit windowed or maybe it's not, but you're just going to make the biggest stone you can. And then when it goes to the secondary cutter, they transform this. I mean, this is an extreme example, but they transform this into something like that because that's what the customer actually needed. They needed a square, old mine cut tanzanite. Now, I hope the customer doesn't really need that because that's a pretty hard order to fill. But, you know, maybe that's a one of a kind. But also, in the process of doing that, the stones get better because they were commercially cut. I mean, you can see this one has a big window. It's got a weird Portuguese cut that's really not doing service to the color of the stone. And once Victoria's recut it, you can see unheated tanzanite. You've got 3 different colors, purple, green, and yellow. You've got a very perfect shape, perfect meat points, perfect polish, all the stuff that we love to do. That's what they're looking for. And when I talk to the cutters and the cutting factories in Paris, I'm asking them, you know, how important it is for your customers. Do they really look at the meat points? Do they really look at the polish? Or is it just about, you know, making the shape right? And she said, oh no, if the meat points aren't right, like they reject the stones. So this is for high-end stuff, you know, like Cartier and Van Cleef. But like, it was interesting for me to find out that they are actually looking at that stuff, and that's important to them too, which is not exactly what I thought. The other reason why they might is to change the size. So not just the shape, but a lot of times it needs to fit into a certain calibrated setting because it has to fit into the design that they want to do. So they're going to do that. Now, mostly what I'm talking about, these examples are maybe they're centerpiece stones, but more often than not, like the example I showed before with those blue sapphires, they're smaller stones. I mean, they're not going to take a 20 carat emerald and recut it into a 8 carat emerald because it's not the right shape. That's a different story. Big, expensive stones, they don't want to lose too much weight. But we're talking about stones under a carat, which is the majority of what the jewelers are using these days. So I did a class with this lady, Aurelie, the lady I showed you before, a couple weeks ago. We went up to her house, and if you haven't been following me, you won't know that for the last year, my personal journey has been learning how to do the jam peg, the French traditional technique. So I've been going up and meeting different people like this so that I can understand that how they're using the machine, because it's very different than the American technique. It's very different than everything that I've ever learned. So I went up and I learned with her because her specialty is doing this kind of, they call it adjusting for the piece. So they recut the stone to fit the setting. They have to cut the bottom and the top so that it fits in the setting, but the window's also closed and the meat points are nice. And everything has to fit in. But you can see, well, I don't know if you can see very clearly, but the settings on the end, a lot of these are rectangles, but the ones on the end are weird trapezoidal shapes. So that's what I was actually going to learn. I already knew how to make a rectangle, but how do they make the weird shapes? Like, I don't know if you've ever seen, I don't know, I don't have a picture of it, but the Van Cleef mystery settings where they do like flower petals, and it's a whole bunch of rectangles, except for around the edge, the rectangles are cut with curves in them to fit into the flower petals. It's really complicated, and yeah, she taught me how to do it. So now I have an idea. I'm not very good at it yet, but in my mind, I have an idea. And so this is what they're doing. You know, they're measuring the setting, or maybe they already know the sizes they need. They're checking the stone to see how big they are, going through the cutting process, actually fitting it into the piece while it's still on the dop. And then, okay, it doesn't quite fit, we'll adjust it a little bit more. And it's all done by feeling and by eye. It's not done necessarily by measurements and calibration, because it's pretty hard to measure the inside of the setting, especially when not all the spaces are the same size or shape. So they do it with tactile feeling. And you know, that's a pretty advanced skill, I think. That's why I went to go learn it with her. And so this could be done by, you know, a number of cutters. You know, you've got the master cutters of Paris that are doing this kind of recutting work. And when I talked to the cutters in Paris, they pretty much told me, we never ever cut rough. Like 100% of the stones that the cutters cut in Paris are recuts. For the story that I just told, you know, the whole system is set up that way. So it could be by a guy like this. It could be by, you know, these old school guys in London that are still using the hand crank. You know, there's still one guy left that does it like this, where he just has the super old jam peg with just the holes, and he's hand cranking for the cutting. Or it could be done by somebody like this, David Nassi in New York, who's on a Swiss machine with a handpiece. And, you know, he's got his music going, and he's rocking and rolling, and you know, winning about 20 Spectrum Awards along the way. So you know, this isn't necessarily just the story of Europe. This is also happening in New York. This is happening in LA. This is happening in, you know, a lot of places. So to sum it all up, this is basically the story of cutting in service of the stone. The first cutter cuts to make the biggest stone they can, and also to orient the color. This is also really important because, you know, let's say that you are a Thai cutter in Chantaburi or Bangkok. Thailand is a ruby center, right? They do everything, but ruby is their specialty. Those guys really, really know how to orient the color in ruby. I would say maybe even better than any of the cutters in Paris or New York or whatever, because all they do is ruby. Same with the Sri Lankans. You know, they really know how to look at sapphire and put the color in just the right place. Even if they cut the stone not very well, the color is there. So then when we recut it, we don't have to make that most important decision of where is the face. They've done that hard step for us. So even if we're not great cutters or recutters, we could still make an amazing stone in the recutting process because they did the hardest step for us. So they're working in service of color and size, and then the secondary cutter is working in service of the brand, but still to make the stone the best that it can be without losing too much weight, because of course there's, you know, money behind all this stuff. So that's the story of the jewelry world. If you didn't know that story, that is what's happening out here. That's why we're all here in Tucson, and because we're in that, you know, we're right here right now. You know, we're in that part where all the jewelers or dealers or whatever from around the world are coming here either to sell their stones or to buy their stones for the jewelry world, for the cutting world, or just for their retail shops. Maybe that doesn't look like your process. So let's talk about the world of the cutting competition, which is a completely different beast. This one won't take long because I think you know this better than I do. So the journey of the stone for the cutting competition starts here, right? The diagram gets published, whether it's the USFG journal or the Australian one. You download it from the internet, and then you're hunting around all of your drawers, or maybe you're coming to Tucson and you're looking for the piece of rough, right? You got to find and they'll tell you, you need this kind of material, whether it's natural or synthetic. It's got to be this big, right? So you got to go hunting around and find one that's going to fit. If it's too small, of course, it's not going to work. If it's super, super big, well, we don't really want to saw it in half. Maybe we will. So that's part of the journey. We're hunting to match the design. And then comes the fun part, right? We're looking at the design, we're following it perfectly, and trying to do the best stone that we can do, because we know that that stone's going to get sent here and that it's going to get judged, and that, you know, we want to be able to have the bragging rights and say, I got 100%. So the shape, the size, the pattern, it's all, you know, for the diagram. And then, then the judging's happening. So how well did you do? How well did you stick to the plan? How's the calibration? How's the polish? How's the meet points? Did you use the right material? What are the other quality factors that they look for? Did I miss one? The girdle. How thick is the girdle? Did you polish the girdle? How what?
Polished.
How polished is the girdle? Exactly. So yeah, getting the loops out. Hopefully not that one. And I think if that's the judge, you gotta get a new one. So to sum this one up, so I think we can understand already the purpose here is different. This path is not the path where we're cutting in service of the stone. It's cutting in service of the diagram, which is fine because this is a competition, and you know, how else can we judge a stone unless we have a starting point, or you know, a focal point, a goal. But when I'm imagining this talk, my main idea is, because the American cutting community has, especially us and the generation we're at now, you know, we've come up with the cutting competitions. And for me, cutting competitions existed already, like even maybe before I was born, or definitely before I knew anything about faceting. So this is like an integral part of the way that people cut in America, even though this is not have anything to do with the jewelry trade, right? Because if you go through all the steps that it takes to get this winning stone, and then you had to try to sell that to the jeweler, your labor costs probably would be too high. Your yield would, I would guess, be too low, and it would be a mismatch. You know, the needs of the diagram and the needs of the jeweler, they're not in the same story. We're going to come back to this, but these are our two journeys. One of them I'm calling cutting in service of the stone. The other one I'm calling cutting in service of the diagram. Okay, so we have these two modes, but there's more, because there's more reasons why we cut, right? Because you guys aren't cutting competition stones every day, and I'm not cutting for the jewelry trade every day, because there's also just for us, right? Cutting for the sake of the cutter, cutting for the fun of it.
Is this you when you're old?
Oh, I hope so. It looks more like Hashnu, actually, doesn't it? I don't know. Yeah, I hope that's me when I'm old. So, okay, we know about this, right? I don't have to explain this to you guys. Why are we cutting? It's fun. It's the joy of creating, the joy of experimenting, the joy of expressing ourselves in our unique medium. You know, it doesn't always have to be for the competition. It could just be for our own fun. And for me, in my journey of the jam peg in the last year, you know, I don't show all those stones that I cut, because some of them are pretty bad. You know, some of those early ones. I had a guy on YouTube critiquing me last week, like, oh, why did you post a stone that has a window and the shape's a little bit off? And I'm like, I don't have to have every stone be perfect. I'm allowed to just have fun too. Just because I have a school and everything, like I'm allowed to have fun. So we can have fun. We can just do crazy things. We can make diagrams. We can try stuff. We can improvise. And then, of course, there's the mental part of it. I think we don't talk about this very much, but I hope you guys are experiencing what I'm experiencing, that feeling where, you know, maybe you're having a bad day and you just sit down at the machine, take a breath. Maybe you got your music on or your podcast, or maybe you're just cutting to the rhythm of the stone, and everything's okay. You know, for me, this is like my number one form of mental health treatment. You know, like if I'm not cutting every week or you try to do it every day, like I'm a grumpy dude. Now I haven't cut for 2 weeks because I've been on the road. I'm getting close. No. This is just you know, the breaths in between. And then finally, you know, that great feeling when we pull it out of the acetone or we take it off the dop or whatever, and we see that thing we've done, even if we made a million mistakes along the way, we get to see, oh, it looks cool. It looks crazy. You know, maybe you're Scott and you're doing historical designs, which I love to do too. Maybe you're creating, you know, brand new designs that you just made up, or maybe you're improvising and just, you don't know what's going to come out of it. This is one that I did a couple years ago for Matt Milstead, and I was just making it up as I went, starting from that oval shape, and I wasn't totally sure what was going to happen, but when I pulled it out of the acetone, I was very pleasantly surprised, and he was too. And you know, it feels good to have done something. You know, we didn't spend those 4 or 5 hours watching movies or playing on our phone or whatever else we might be distracting ourselves with. We made something, whether it's glass or synthetic or natural. It's cool, right? I think that's ultimately why we are all doing this. I think even the cutters who are professionals who work in gem cutting factories or studios, they still have that sense of pride and that sense of achievement, though they get paid to do it, which is, you know, for better or worse, they get paid to do it. So, okay, let's talk about some of the pitfalls of both of these paths. And you may or may not agree with this. This is just one way of looking at things. But to me, I have an idea that especially because I am a professional cutter and I do this for my job. When we're cutting the stones in service of the design, it can be easy to lose sight of the stone and the fact that the value that we're building it's the stone, right? Whether it's a competition stone or a fun stone or a customer stone, if there's money involved in the stone, if it's not purely just for pleasure and you're going to just put it in your box and show your buddies when you get to Tucson, the value of the stone is the stone, ultimately, right? No customer is ever going to see your diagram. They're never going to see your notes. They're never going to know the angles that are on there. I mean, they might notice if you windowed it or not. They might notice if your round's not really round. But anything more than that, they probably won't even notice if your meet points are right. So when it comes to working on a nice piece of rough, any stone that has any value, the value's in the stone. So we have to kind of remember that. If we've been trained in the way of the competition cutting method, and we're here spending maybe a lot of money on rough, we should take a minute when we get home and check ourselves and be like, okay, you know, how much yield am I actually going to get out of this? Should I be following this diagram, or is there something else that I could do that might be more beneficial to the stone? This slide is a lot of the reason why I wanted to do this talk, and this is what the guy in the Meet Point meetup was asking me about, you know, because I'm watching all the Facebook groups and the Discord group and the questions that people send to me privately. And, you know, there's so many things over my 10 years of cutting where you look in the Facebook groups and it's stuff like this. You know, it's just like, my lap isn't totally flat. It's got to get to 0.00000 or whatever. Or, you know, I'm cutting the stone and it's like the diagram says 45, but it's 45.08. It's like the better tools we get, because now we've got, you know, digital angles. We've got, you know, buzzers and, you know, the Gem Master 2 has that thing. It's like the more technology that we have, the less we're actually looking at the stone. We're getting really obsessed with these things. And I had this experience when I started selling the sintered laps a couple years ago, and I got, you know, like 99% positive feedback, 1% awful, evil, angry customers that are just like, you said this lap was good, and I put it on my Ultratech, and it's not perfectly flat, and it's brand new, but it's like, you know, I go to this side and it's 0.01 and the other side's 0.02. Your reputation is ruined. You're awful. Blah 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 blah. It's like, wow, okay, you know, like I've been using this lap for a while and I'm cutting great stones on it. 99 out of 100 other people didn't care. Yeah, you know, that guy actually is just a jerk, but you know, but then you start seeing this tendency, right? Like there's certain people in the community that are just so fixated on the machine, which is fine because I know some people are engineers, and the faceting community in America started as engineers, so they're allowed to do that. I just try to ignore them a little bit because to me, I'm all about the stone. Like my path is the path of the stone. What I want to say with this is kind of just like we don't always need to be hyper focused. If you're doing the competition, that's one thing because you know you want to get that 100% score. But if you're just having fun and it says 45.08 or 40.01, it's okay. I'm giving you permission right now if you needed it. It's okay. No one's going to know. On the other hand, though, if we get too obsessed with yield and weights, it's really, really easy to make the biggest possible stone. I mean, this is what we are here to fix, right? The cutters that cut for the biggest possible stone without a sensitivity towards beauty, without a sensitivity towards aesthetic design choices and stuff like that. And yeah, you can make a big stone with a window. You can make a big stone with a bad shape, and because maybe you followed the perfect outline shape of the rough and you didn't, balance it with your own sense of symmetry and stuff like that. Or yeah, maybe you just aren't very good at shaping your stones, and so they come out like that. So we can go both ways. I don't want to just pick on the people who love the digital readout says 0.000 all the time, because the cutters of the world that don't have that stuff can also make mistakes on their end. But I think it would be good if we could somewhere meet in the middle, where we can be happy, kind of that wabi-sabi idea, right? It's like, it's perfectly imperfect. It's fine. So yeah, what are we trying to accomplish? That's what we should be asking. Is this all about, is this a precision tool competition for you? Or is it about craftsmanship and how good you are at executing your idea, bringing your thing to life? Are we just playing with these expensive toys for the sake of it? Or are we trying to create art, make something beautiful? And whether that means your faceting machine is perfectly calibrated or it's a piece of junk and you can still make it work, who's going to know in the end? Because all they see is the stone. And then the major question, I think, for me is, are we working in service of the stone or are we working in service of the diagram? I want to just close out with a small story, a case study. So if we go back to 1935, this is like the origin point of the American faceting community. We have J. Harry Howard of South Carolina. He writes this book called Handbook for the Amateur Lapidary. This is the first time in the history of the world that anybody's written an instruction manual for gem cutting. Faceting, cabbing, spheres, drilling, beads, everything. It's all in here. Before this, there was a couple of articles, there was a couple of columns in a magazine here and there, but there was never a comprehensive encyclopedia until he wrote it in 1935. In his book, and so 1935, keep in mind, we're in the middle of the Great Depression. So in his book, he shows his machine. So this is his personal machine. He talks about how you can make it for $5 based on tools that you already have, because he's, I guess, assuming that anyone reading his book has, a tool workshop in their basement. Maybe they all did. But, he said he already had this bench grinder laying around. He built up this thing, and he's cutting stones on this. Now, the cool part about this story is, during the pandemic, through a bunch of research, I found this machine in a museum in South Carolina, and last week the museum gave me that machine. So, thank you. That was probably one of the coolest things. If you want to see the whole story, I just posted like a 30-minute YouTube video detailing all the steps. It's a really fun story. It's not just the machine. I got 40 boxes of his stuff. So you can all imagine what your faceting studio looks like. All the little Gerber baby bottles full of powder and all that stuff. I have all of that stuff. Cigar boxes full of rough. You can see where he's been cutting bangles out of them and stuff like that. Really, really cool. They didn't give me any of his stones. He cut 4,000 faceted stones in his life, and they're all in the museum in a safe. And I took a day and looked at all of them a couple years ago. But what I wanted to show you here is his actual faceting apparatus. He's got 16 index teeth. He's got no cheater, and he's got no depth control. He's only got angle right here. So he turns this thing and it gives him a different angle, and his index gear is here. So this is extremely crude by anybody's standards today. There's nobody in the world that cuts on a 16 index. Even the jam peg has 64 options around the teeth. So this is super, super crude. But what I wanted to show you was what some of his stones look like. So this is a citrine that he did. It's quite big. It's probably, 15 millimeters across or something like that. You can see nice performance. I didn't have any videos to show, but it was a very nice looking stone. Nice deep color. Now, not every meet point is perfect. And I think we can give him a little bit of room here, because pretty much the only place where he kept the facet meet points not perfect was right at the girdle. And hopefully we can agree that that is the best place. If you're going to have some open meet points, that's the ones that no one really sees. But check out his stars. Well, first of all, he's got a really nice balanced table. He's getting a very nice polish. We all know that citrine kind of sucks to polish. He's doing great. Nice meet points. Sharp, sharp, pretty much everything, but he does leave it, he consistently leaves a gap right here. Maybe this is just his style, but he's able to do this without a cheater, without all of the indexes that we have. I am assuming that he has to do a bit of manual rotation in the dop because you can't cut around brilliant with only 16 facets. There's not enough spots. I'll show you one more. This is a step cut in a, I don't know what you'd call this, a shield, yes, thank you. So you can see he's getting some good reflection here. He's got very nice parallel lines. If you guys have never done a step cut before, it can be tricky to get the lines to come out perfectly parallel. Even when you have a cheater, sometimes they just go crooked for no reason. And he's able to manually manipulate it to the point where he's getting everything perfectly straight in the polish. And I show you this because he didn't have a digital angle. He didn't have a depth gauge. He didn't have a beeper thing. He didn't have a strain gauge. He didn't have a cheater. He didn't even have height control. He's doing all this stuff manually by eye. And I don't know how long it took him to cut stones, but I did do some rough math. I forget how old he was in 35, but I think he had about 40 years between 35 and when he died, 1935 and when he died. He cut 4,000 stones. That means he cut almost one stone every day for his entire life, which doesn't make sense to me. A lot of them were cabs. A lot of them were cabs. So maybe he did more than one in a day on Saturdays or something. But, you know, I don't think he was retired when he wrote the book. He was an electrical engineer. So he was also working. He wasn't a professional cutter. And he's able to do this kind of quality with the crudest of crude machines. So I show you this just to inspire you a little bit that we don't need to be so fixated on all of these technical details. And you can just let yourself have a little fun. And if it's not going the way you think it should be going, maybe just keep going and see what happens. You know, if it's not all working out to the diagram, just adjust it or improvise or see where it goes. And maybe you'll be more impressed with your own abilities than if you perfectly executed the diagram. That's the challenge that I want to leave to you guys today. So, okay, final thoughts of this talk. Don't get too caught up in the fine details. You know, we're having fun here, right? If you're doing the competition, okay, I understand. It's a different thing, but that's only one stone a year. So for all those other stones a year, you don't have a good excuse. So don't get too caught up. See what happens if you go off the script. See what happens if you don't use a diagram. See what happens if you change the diagram or just make something up. I offer you the possibility of considering, are you working for the stone or are you working for the diagram? And if you've only ever worked for the diagram, see what happens if you go off. Just give it a try. You don't have to show anybody. I didn't show all my bad stones. So if you make an ugly one, okay, whatever, but maybe you make something really, really cool and that actually upgrades your skill set. You know, that, for me, I started improving not that long ago, maybe 2 years ago. And I just started, you know, because I'd cut, you know, I think once you've cut so many stones, you know what the angles are going to be. You can do a round brilliant without the diagram now, right? Everyone should be shaking their head yes. You can do a round brilliant without the diagram, right? There's only 5 angles. So finishing the stone is better than not finishing the stone. I know you guys have a drawer of the half-dones. Yeah. Get them back out. See what happens if you put them back on the dop and you can recut. See if you can learn how to recut on your own. If you don't know how to recut on your own, we have an online class for that. It's a video. You can do it at home. Final 2 thoughts. Beauty, in my opinion, is more important than perfection, and have fun. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me once again.